सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात्। ॐ तत्सत्। ॐ तत्सत्। ॐ तत्सत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति।
Main focus is on study skills, and I borrow principles from a field of psychology called as educational psychology, which studies the human brain and how we learn different topics, and then it suggests to us different strategies which we can use for better studying, more efficient studying, smart study. Basically, you put in less amount of effort and you get more returns from that effort. And this is a very big topic, but the focus of my lecture today is going to be on revision. Okay? Revision. And basically what I'm going to share with you guys is 3 ways that the 3 strategies which you can use to revise your content. These 3 strategies are proven by psychological research, neurological research, that it helps us remember what we read more efficiently. Because your prelims is ultimately a test of your memory. Over the years, I have met many students who are brilliant, very sharp. They study very hard, but they are like me. Okay. By that I mean, whether I'm brilliant or not is your call. By this sentence, I mean they have a difficulty remembering things, which was always my problem. In my years of preparation, not a boastful sentence, but I can confidently say that I have not yet come across a single book which I was having trouble understanding. I open the book, I begin to read it, and with a little effort, I understand whatever is being read. But on the day of the prelims, when there is a question in front of me, you ask me to explain the concept to someone else, I can do that. I have my notes in front of me, I have my book. But on the day of the prelims, you don't have your book or notes. If you do that, you will be blacklisted for your life. So the challenge is to remember. Okay. And overall, psychology studies the human brain. One very important function of the human brain is memory. So neuroscience and psychology study how memories are formed and how they consolidate. God or nature, whatever word you prefer, has given us 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, etc., etc. We take in information from the outside world through these 5 senses. And for study purposes, most of the times we use sight. I don't think there is anyone who smells the book and then remembers the content, right? So we see the book, we take the words in, but then what happens processing in your brain? Some things they stick. Some things, majority of the things, in fact, they melt away. What sticks and what melts away? And then how do we ensure that a greater percentage of whatever we have read actually sticks in your brain? That is revision. Okay. And the three strategies that I am going to discuss with you today, they are contained in this book. Is everyone having a problem hearing me? My mic is going very well up and down. So I think, Priyanka, it must be a problem on your end. Please check your internet connection. Okay. Whatever I am going to be sharing with you today is based on this extremely interesting book that I have read recently. Yeah. Yeah, most of the people, they can read it. Okay. So this book that I have read very recently, called Make It Stick. Now this stick is not the beating stick. It is chikatne. Make something sticks. Okay. The 3 authors, they are, sorry Tejas, today's session is mainly meant to be in English. Make It Stick. And some of you may not be able to read the small line below that. The line of the book is The Science of Successful Learning. And in general, my PPTs, I usually insert a YouTube video, 8-minute animated summary of this book. But today we are not going to be able to play it. So those who want this link, you can approach me later on. I will share it with you. but it's on YouTube and you can directly go to YouTube and view it. Simply search the name of the book, How to Study, Make It Stick, and then forget the authors. If you simply type Make It Stick, the very first result that appears is this book called, is the video summary, animated video summary of this book. Okay. Now, what is the main message that is being given in this book? The author tells us that first of all, what the authors did was they conducted a study, survey. Okay. They went to some of the best universities in the world. So Harvard, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, and they surveyed around 10,000 students from these universities, and they asked them a simple question, that what is your number one revision? What is your number one revision strategy? Revise करता ते कसं करता हे विचारलं त्यांनी. And what surprised them is that more than 80% of the students replied that they reread, or what we call revision readings. This doesn't have to be explained to anyone. What do we think? How are we going to remember stuff better? We read the book once. Most of the things we read, we forget. So then our solution is to go back to the book and read it once again and again and again and again. This is what I call brute force approach. Okay? And then what they recommend actually is that out of all the revision strategies out there in the field of educational psychology, in fact, rereading the text. Now, this text can be your book or it can be your notes, whatever you prefer. Rereading the book, same thing again and again and again and again, is actually one of the least effective memory techniques for remembering. As a percentage of what you read, how much do you remember? This is how we measure the effectiveness of revision techniques, right? If I am revising 10 points and I remember only 2 of them, actually stored in memory, only 2 of them, then very inefficient technique, because to completely revise or completely remember all 10 points, I am going to have to do 5 revisions. But if there is a technique which I can remember 5 points out of 10, then I cover the same ground in only 2 revisions. Less amount of time is required. And as any UPSC or MPSC aspirant, time is your most precious resource. There is never sufficient time to thoroughly study what we want. And what are these 3 strategies that I am going to be discussing today? The first one is called interleaving. Okay, I'll just write down the names before, and then when I switch over to my PPT, there is a slide which is dedicated to each one. So don't worry about writing them down. Okay. Second one is called as active recall. Okay. And the third one is called as spaced repetition. Have any of you ever heard of these 3 words? Let alone implement them. No one. Anyone online? Have you ever, you can raise your hands if you have heard what these 3 words mean. No one. Yeah, there is one. Good. Aryaman has heard. Good. And majority of you guys don't seem to be. Yeah. Few of you have 1 or 2 of them. Okay, good. Yeah. So some of you have heard active recall, but not the other ones. Okay. So let's see what they are. Now, before going into these 3 techniques, I want to share with you another concept which they shared with everyone. Okay. It is this thing called as the learning pyramid. And they divide the different study strategies that students use they divide it into two things, two types, which is called as active learning and passive learning. So out of all the content that you receive, how much do you actually internalize? I am specifically using the word internalize, not just remember. Because if you mug it up, you are remembering it, but you may not understand it. When I say that you are digesting, you are internalizing the content, I am talking about two things. No, you are remembering it, no doubt. Okay. But you are also understanding it. You are going to be able to apply it. That is what we mean by internalize, digest. When we take in food and we thoroughly digest it, what is the meaning of digesting food? When the amino acids and the nutrients contained in the food are actually available to your cells for using as energy. That is what we mean by internalizing. What if you ate food and then none of it actually went to your system and in from one end and out from the other end? What is the use of such food? So what I mean is, those study strategies where you remember more than 50% of what you take in, those are called as active learning strategies. The bottom, the green side of the pyramid. Okay. And other strategies where you internalize less than 50% of what you engage with, those are called passive learning strategies. And if you take a look at the words, attending lectures, 5%, reading books or studying PDFs, notes, whatever, 10%, audio visual, that is YouTube videos, whatnot, 20%, and demonstration. This doesn't apply to UPSC, MPSC, but some physical skill like playing a guitar, seeing someone play the guitar, that is demonstration, 30%, but it's less than 50%. But look at 1, 2, and 3. These are in fact the three most important study strategies which majority of the students use. And what this study is telling us is that in fact they are the least effective from remembering, internalizing, and understanding the content. So then what is important? Discussion, 50%. Practice by doing. Again, this cannot be done for competitive exams. What can you do? If you are learning a sport or a musical instrument, then actually taking the guitar in your hand and strumming will help you remember. But so point number 2 is not really useful for us. But the biggest learning strategy is teaching others. Now, this I can absolutely guarantee from personal 8 years of teaching experience. Before my teaching began, I had spent around 4 or 5 years only preparing for exam. And then in my first year, when I realized that now I have to make a switch from only studying for the exam to actually delivering the content in front of students, that is when I realized that, oh my God, there are so many things I haven't actually understood. And this happens to most of us. As we are studying, time to time, certain questions pop up in our mind. And the natural response is, nantar bagun gheto. We sweep it under the carpet. We just ignore the questions. And those questions are actually indicators of gaps in your knowledge. If you ignore those questions, your gap is never going to be identified. It is never going to be filled. Okay. But then when I started preparing for lectures, I realized that there are certain questions which I keep on thinking of, but I have never really bothered to find out their answer. And then I realized that the very fact that I thought of these questions means that the students who are... I realized that the very fact that I had thought of these questions means that the students who are going to be sitting in front of me are also going to be thinking of these questions. It is a possibility that I will receive those questions from the students. And then to avoid, these words can't be said in English, beizzati, of having to tell the students ki, I don't know the answer to your question. When you do additional research for that, you start to really understand the question. Now, why did I tell you this? Because one very important study strategy that I recommend to all of you, it combines elements of discussion with teaching others. You might be thinking that, okay, you have been teaching for 8 years. No big deal that you can stand in front of students and teach. We are in our first year of preparation, maybe second year. We don't remember half of what you are talking. So how are we going to teach? Some of you may have stage fright. Come up here and थरथर कापायला लागले, घाम फुटायला लागला वगैरे काही होऊ शकतं. So you don't have to always stand in front of a crowd to be able to teach. What I recommend to students is make a group of some 3, 4, 5 of you guys, and every evening as you are ending your day, okay, sit together for discussion. Now here the most important point is that you have to have that discipline to ensure that the discussion is actually about studies. Otherwise, how many times has this happened that we get together, abhyasachi charcha karu. 5 minutes we talk about study and then someone comes up with some different topic and then the remaining 2 hours are gone. Dhajjiya ud gayi. This should not happen. If this happens, then all of this, there is no point in it. But what you should be doing is that each one of you, preferably if there are 3 or 5 of you guys, each one of you has to be studying some different topic. One person is studying geography, another is studying economy, third one may be studying polity. And basically at the end of the day, each person gets about 15-20 minutes. And then he has to explain to those in front of him basically what he studied throughout the day. This will be very much broken language because himself you have not really understood it. That is not the point of the exercise. Okay. When you sit together for discussion, you get 2 advantages. The first one is that your 2 friends, they are at least passively, they are getting to hear about polity, which is your topic. They are studying geography and economy. But ek tir do nishan. At least they begin to get into that topic so that in the future, when they pick up Lakshmikant, it's there somewhere in the back of the mind. It's there, whatever you have discussed. And then once you start reading the book, you will start, the light bulbs will start blinking. Okay. And second point is, when you are teaching your friends, it is actually you start to understand the points that you did not understand. Your friends will start to ask you questions. What is this? What is that? Asa ka hoto, tasa ka hoto. And you will not be able to answer those questions. That is not even the point. Be candid enough to admit that I don't know. Okay. But it will help you identify those points which even you have not understood. So it's to their advantage and it is to your advantage also. It combines discussion with teaching others. And since the other people are your friends, there is no stage fear. Okay. And why do I keep emphasizing this? That because there is a very famous saying about teaching. Okay. The saying is that when one teach, 2 learn. Not 2 people in front. If I am teaching, not only are you guys learning, but even I am learning. And this is not just a cheering up moral sort of statement. There is actual science to this. And that is given over here. Okay. So you might want to consider this. Now, continuing to the 3 study strategies that this book was talking about. The first one, interleaving. What does this mean? Interleaving. Okay. Many a times students come to me and they ask me, Ki Dada, should I be studying one topic at a time or 2 or 3 topics parallelly? Okay. पडलाय का तुमच्यातल्या कोणाला हा प्रश्न कधी? एका वेळेला एक विषय का एका वेळेला 2-3 विषय चालू ठेवायचे? Well, this book is telling you that multiple subjects at a time is the better strategy. Okay. What I used to do, the reason for this is, if you mix it up, if you mix up your studies, basically it will help your mind stay fresh. Because if you are like me, no matter which topic it is, I don't have the stamina to read it for 8 or 10 hours a day. Modern history, polity, my favorite topics. 8 te 10 तास झाले की यार बस. That's my reaction. Okay. And then what do? We sit in the morning with 3-hour study session. 1.5 hours we are able to study. And then our mind gets tired. In fact, we get bored. And then we say, ki, theek hai, chalo, ek 10-minute break. And then, does it ever last? Stay for 10 minutes. Ek episode. One becomes 2 episodes. And then suddenly 2 episodes becomes the entire season. And the rest of the day is gone. The reason for this is because your mind does not have the energy to return to that topic. You are tired of those words, that language, that book for that day. So that is why this strategy is saying that you should structure your timetable throughout the day in such a way that you keep mixing different topics together. Now, what I used to do is I used to divide my day into slots. Now, this slot can be, depending on your stamina, it can be big or small. My study slots were 3 hours. 9 to 12 first slot, 2 to 5 second slot, and 7 to 10 third slot. And in each slot, I used to study something different. So, morning slot may be polity. The afternoon slot is low energy time for anyone, especially Pune people. 1 te 4 cheez hope lagte. So, afternoon slot was some easy topic like modern history, fun to read. And then evening slot was something like geography, environment, etc., etc. It helps us keep our mind fresh. Okay. And I will leave you to see the video of why mixing up all of our studies helps. Okay. And another important point in the strategy of interleaving is that the way in which you are studying should also be mixed up. Now see this image. From left to right, even this student's day can be thought of as divided into 3 slots. Right? The first slot, he is spending writing, reading, writing. Okay. It can be either ways. Now, you can switch this also. The points below, you may not be able to read them, but go by the color. Each color is a different topic. Now, in one slot, he is finishing this example is finishing 6 topics. You may not do such a huge deal. What I used to do was morning slot is 3 hours. And within those 3 hours, I used to mix up writing, reading, and viewing videos. These are the different ways in which I study. So first 1 hour, for me, the mentally most taxing thing is reading books. So first 1 hour, reading books. Then next 1 hour, writing notes. And then final 1 hour is something easy, because final 1 hour is our mind has begun to get tired. So low energy activity is required. So go to YouTube, some good video, some good playlist. There are tons of them now on YouTube. And for 1 hour, just passively view those videos. And then so on and so forth. So this first point is actually pretty easy to understand. As you are studying, learn to mix up your studies. Don't just take one book and then for 6 to 8 hours in the day, you are only reading that book. Okay. Mix up your topics. And in addition to that, mix up what it is that you are doing. Are you reading? Are you writing? Are you viewing videos? And some fancy people these days, they also like to listen to the topic. So there are many PDF readers, many applications that you upload the PDF and it will read out the content. So this is also a very good way of learning. This is the first one is interleaving. Okay. But actually out of the 3 strategies, interleaving is the least important one. Okay. The most important one are active recall and spaced repetition. Okay. So the second one is active recall. To understand what I mean by active recall, you guys have to understand the difference between two concepts. No. The first one is the concept of recall versus there is another concept that we sometimes confuse this with. It's called recognition. In human memory, when we say that I remember something, according to psychology, it does not always mean that you are recalling it. When I say I am recalling something, it means that I am pulling that information from my mental library, from my database of information in my mind. Okay. Sometimes what we confuse it with is the concept of recognition. I'll give you some examples. First, theory part. Recognition means someone gives you an external clue, and then you know that, okay, I have read this, I have come across this. That is recognition. Okay. One example is if I say Virat Kohli. The very second I say Virat Kohli, I'm certain of you must have pictured Virat Kohli's face in your mind. So now this is an example of recall. You were able to pull that image from your mental image library and remember that this is Virat Kohli. But sometimes what happens is, many of you will have experienced this. Someone tells you the name of a person, and no matter what you do, you can't remember the face of that person. You know the name. Somewhere, sometime in your life, you met him or her, but you can't remember his or her face. But when that person comes in front of you, then, Arey haan, tu. It clicks in our mind. That is recognition. What happens is your eyes take in the image of that person, and then your mind matches that image with the image in your memory. So that is recognition. Yeah. This is also a slightly difficult example. So one example which majority of the people in Maharashtra, especially Pune, will identify with, the difference between recall and recognition is, best example, Ganpatichi Aarti. Any person who has ever attended an Aarti, how does it begin? Everyone assemble in front of the Murti, aise, and there is always an awkward silence. Everyone is waiting for someone else to begin, because no one actually recalls the Aarti. Some kid, या आई-बाबांनी तुडवून त्याच्याकडनं पाठ करून घेतलेली असेल सगळ्या आरत्या, तो सुरुवात करतो. The starting just, and even if that sukhakarta, dukharta, sukhakarta, the moment sukhakarta, someone says it, the rest of the aarti comes tumbling out of our mouth. Similarly, Ganpati Aarti finishes, there is always that 2-second awkward pause, because no one again remembers how to start Shankar Aarti. Someone लवथवती विक्राळा, लवथवती पुढची सगळी आठवते. पुन्हा शंकराची संपली 2 सेकंद आणि दुर्गेची सुरू होते. The reason is that many of us, including myself, have never taken the effort of actually storing that aarti in our memory. From childhood, we have attended so many Ganpati Aartis that we are recognizing the words. ते ध्वनी कानावर पडले की आपल्याला लक्षात येतं. But that does not mean you can remember it. Majority of you, unless your parents forced you, gave you that book, read it 100 times and then narrate it to us, you will not be able to. If I give you a pen and if I tell you to write down the aarti, you will forget majority of the points. Beginning 1 or 2 sentences maybe, but after that you will start to forget it, because what our brain is doing is that it is recognizing the sound pattern, and then the words fall out of our mouth. You are not recalling it, you are recognizing it. And actually the difference between these two concepts is the major reason why simply rereading your books is not a very effective revision technique. Because when you are rereading the same content again and again, what you are doing is you are relying on recognition. So what happens is, many of you may not realize that this is happening. You open a book for revision, you read the content, and then after you have read the content, your mind tells you, okay, this is good. I have understood this. Baslay manamade. Okay. But what you don't understand is you did not remember it before reading the page. You remembered it after reading the page. You didn't, and important point is you didn't remember it. You recognized it after reading the content. But the problem is, for your examination, your prelims and your mains, there is no book. There is no external trigger to jog your memory. Okay. You have to, when in your prelims and more so in your mains, when you want to circle the correct answer, when you want to write the correct content, you have to be able to pull that data from the depths of your mind, from your mental library. If you are able to do that, only then is your study going to be useful for exams. Otherwise, this is an international phenomenon. Throughout India, China, the Western countries, school to university, everywhere this is seen, that there are many students, they study very hard, but they choke on the day of the exam. राव पुस्तक वाचताना सगळं समजतंय वाटत होतं, पण परीक्षेच्या वेळेला सगळ्यांच्या सोबत झालेलं असतं, माझ्यासोबत पण नाही. पुस्तक वाचताना वाटतं की हा लक्षात आहे की when we sit for the exam, सगळं gone. Because if you are rereading the same thing, you are relying on recognition. But to mark the correct answer or to give the correct answer, what you need is recall. It is like if you, in a cricket team, if you are a batsman, but if you spend your entire time practicing catching practice, are you going to be able to score a century in the match? No. To be able to score a century, if you want to be a good batter, we are now supposed to say batter. If you want to be a good batter, you have to practice batting in your nets. You cannot practice fielding only and then expect to perform as a good batsman. You may take some fantastic catches like Ravindra Jadeja, but no one is going to select you in the team only because you are an excellent fielder. You either have to be a good bowler or a good batsman. Right? So when we are practicing something, basically when we are studying, we are practicing for the exam. When we are revising the content, any practice session, and this is a concept which is borrowed from sports. This was developed in sports training psychology, and then it has come over into educational psychology also. Because when you are training for a new sport, you are training your mind to think in certain ways. For any sportsman, if any of you have ever played professional sports, the reason I think that India stays behind in sports is to effectively learn a sport, you need three things. The first one is fitness. You cannot be an Olympian with a beer belly. You need a six-pack. Second thing is technique. Every sport has certain techniques, batting technique, stance, how do you take a stance, ability to play different strokes. You need to be able to execute all of those strokes professionally. Okay. In majority of the coaching institutes for any sport in India, you are taught these two things. A good coach, utawun gheto aplyala. He will teach you good techniques. He will tell you shadow practice, footwork, handwork, how to take a stance, etc. But that is where our training stops. There is a third aspect to being a good sportsman, is developing this temperament as a sportsman. Okay. I have played cricket professionally for 10 years, and this was something even I could never recover from. That is why I never made it anywhere in the sports. When I'm practicing in the net, my mind is at ease that no matter how I play, I am going to get to play my 40, 50 balls. But when I go to the match, there is always this pressure. One wrong stroke and back to the pavilion. Anda. त्याच्यावर परत यायचं. And this pressure used to be so much for me that my free-flowing stroke play could not happen. And no one in my entire 10-year effort in cricket ever taught me this. The science of practice in our field also, what it tells you is, how do you practice effectively? By closely simulating the match conditions in your practice session. What is going to happen in the match? की त्याच्या जितक्या जवळात जवळ तुम्ही प्रॅक्टिस करताना जाऊ शकाल, as close as you can go to the actual match situation in your practice, that is how better your practice is going to be. Rereading your books, you are relying on recognition. To be able to write an effective answer, you need recall. If you are practicing catching, you cannot be a good batter. To be a good batter, you have to redesign your practice session in such a way that you are forcing your mind to rely on recall and not just recognition. So how do we do that? Let's get into the practical action items. Theory part bahut ho gaya. This is very closely related to how you should be reading your book. Okay. So this is an earlier slide which I had discussed with a few of these guys. What I'm talking about is the SRB reading technique. Those who are in front, you can't see the heading, but this is a technique for how you go about reading a book. This slide is a modified version of this reading method called as SQ3R. SQ, and that, like that Rajamouli movie, RRR stands for SQ3R. It is a 5-step process for reading your book. And the common point in these 5 steps is that you are slowly and sequentially, you are reducing the length, the size of the content to a manageable level. The first time you read the book, it is huge. But every next time you go on reading the book, you go on compressing the content smaller and smaller. Okay. So how do we do that? The first thing that I had told these guys is go 1 chapter at a time. Why is this important? Go 1 chapter at a time. I will revisit this when I talk about spaced repetition. But right now, just remember this. For everything that follows, the points below, our unit of measurement is 1 chapter. Many of you guys, you measure your study in the entire book. Ek reading ho gaya. Now what? Do I go for the second reading? But 1 reading of what? The entire book. This must have happened to many of you. If you take a big fat book like Spectrum or Lakshmikant and you spend 15, 20, 25 days reading it just once, and at the end you think that, theek hai, ek reading ho gaya. Now I'll move on to another book. Or this is a very standard question I get. Dada, Lakshmikant, I finished 1 reading. Now what? So do I go start the second reading immediately, or do I go on to the another book? The answer is, first of all, start the second reading immediately. But before that, the important prerequisite is, don't measure your readings in the entire book. It is 1 chapter at a time. Basically, the points that I'm telling you below, I am telling you that every chapter in the book, do not go on to the next chapter until you have read the previous chapter at least 3 times. Tension घेण्याचं कारण नाही. Because I am not saying 3 times read it word for word. How do we do that? So the SQ3R, the first stands for scan. Open the book, go to a chapter and just flip through the pages. See the headings, the images, the tables. And of course, the most important question is, how big is this chapter? How many pages do I have to endure? Okay. It will give you an idea of what is to come. Then, and this will take barely 5 minutes. Then S, then Q. Q stands for questions. This point I already covered. In all of our studies, whenever we think of a question, always write it down. Otherwise, you are going to forget it. Okay. And a question in your mind is an indicator of a knowledge gap. If you ignore those questions, or if you only try to remember them, we don't remember them, we forget them. But it is a knowledge gap which has been identified, but which has not been filled. So always get into the habit of writing down your questions in the margin of a book. Okay, so that is Q. Then R. R stands for read. First 5 minutes, scan the chapter, then go back to the start of the chapter and simply read the chapter end to end. Important point over here is no highlighting, no underlining. Why? Because in the first reading, you don't yet have that judgment of what to underline. Since you are so new to the content, many of us, we end up underlining the entire chapter. Everyone tells us, kai underline karaycha, whatever is important. No one tells us how do we identify what is important. And when you are reading the content for the first time, everything seems important. So in the first reading itself, if you go for underlining, you will underline the entire chapter. Don't do that. Once you finish reading the first chapter, the chapter for the first time, don't simply jump to the next chapter. You read it word for word, go back to the start of the chapter and read the entire chapter a second time. Okay. Now, in this second time, what you are supposed to be doing is highlighting. Now, in this highlighting also, there is a specific technique. It's called making boxes. That I will discuss with you later on. But mark out the important sentences. The unit of measurement is sentences. Because when you are reading the same content for the second time, you are now in a better position to identify the important sentences. So if one paragraph is, say, 10 sentences, you will begin to realize that not all 10 sentences are equally important. Maybe 1 or 2 sentences in between are more important. And then later on, if you read only those 1 or 2 sentences, you will remember what was given in that paragraph. So learn to identify such important sentences in your second reading. Okay. Then after your second reading, again go back to the start of the chapter for the third time. Now this third reading is not going to take very long. Because for the third time, you don't have to read the entire chapter end to end. Third time, only read the boxes which you made in the second reading. Read the heading, then the boxes. Try to remember what is this point. If you remember it, move on. Okay. And then in the third reading, what you should be underlining are important words. See, second reading, sentences. Third reading, words. When you are reading the same content for the third time, what you will realize is that out of these 10 sentences, these 2 sentences are more important. I read only those 2 sentences, I remember everything above and below. But actually, within those 2 sentences also, these 2 or 3 words are important. If I read only those words, I will remember that sentence. And from that sentence, I will remember that paragraph. And from that paragraph, I will remember the heading. So when you are reading the content for the third time, underline only the important words within those sentences. Okay. And then after this point, when you come back to the same content for the fourth time, and that may be later on, whenever, you are ready for revision reading. So fourth time and then as many times after that as is required, those readings are your revision readings. Okay. See, understand what we have done. In this technique of reading the book, I call this successive compression. Okay. Successive, because in every next reading, you are compressing the content further and further. Okay. But if anyone here is from a computer programming background, this is a common challenge in computing also. You want to reduce the size of the file, but not lose the content. If you reduce the number of memory spaces in storage, you have less zeros and ones. And then subsequently, the quality of the file that you want to store goes on diminishing. A 128 KB MP3 is less powerful than 256 KB MP3. A 500 KB image, if you zoom in too much, it will get pixelated. Then if the image is 5 MB TIFF file, it is huge. Okay. The same challenge is over here. We want to reduce the size of our study, but we don't want to miss the point. Okay. So in this technique, every next time that we are reading the chapter, we are reducing the scope of our studies slowly. First time, you are totally new, so it will take a lot of time. Second time, you are reading the same content quickly for the second time, so it will take less amount of time, and you are making boxes. Okay. Third reading, only the boxes, the sentences, and you are underlining important words. And then fourth and subsequent readings, you are only reading the important keywords. Okay. And then one chapter, when you are ready with this compression, how do we go about doing revision readings? Okay. Original content was largest to smallest. Chota karat anla. But revision readings, you are supposed to go from smallest to largest. So fourth time, fifth time, when you revisit that chapter, what you are supposed to do is you open the book in front of you, read the heading, and you have to train your eyes that don't read the whole thing word for word. Okay. Your eyes should jump across the important keywords. So I open the book, heading. You should do this so many times that your mind should get into the practice that you should be able to mentally blur the other parts of the page. You understand what I mean by blur? It's pixelate hoto. And only the highlighted words should stand out like magic. And tack. And then after you have read one heading, take a pause. And then remember for yourself, what is this? What was this point? Okay. And in between, if you feel, okay, this point is slightly, it's hazy. I'm not remembering it very well. Then only for that point, read the sentences. If the sentences are enough, well and good. If the sentences are not enough, then read that paragraph once again. Okay. If after reading the paragraph also, you don't understand what is this point, then read the heading again. And if after reading the original content also you are not able to remember, then you have to do additional research. That is a different topic. So go to Google, go to YouTube, catch hold of a faculty and ask them a question. Okay. But Sushant is giving a very good analogy. The way Sherlock Holmes analyzes people, only important aspects. Very good. Outwardly. So, original content, progressive compression, making it smaller and smaller. Revision begins with the smallest component, the most important aspects. And only those points where the words are not enough, we go to sentences. Sentences are not enough, we read the paragraph. Paragraph is not important, not sufficient, we read the heading. Heading is also not sufficient, additional research is required. Compress, revise. Compress, revise. This is the trick for revision reading. Okay. But if linking all of this together with the concept of active recall, those of you who are very keen listeners, you must have realized already that whatever I'm talking about is actually not recall. And I was careful not to use the word recall when I was telling you this successive compression technique. Okay. Because even at the smallest point, when you are reading only the important words, what did I say? Heading, tack, words, and then remember. After you have read the words, when you are trying to remember for yourself, that is not recall. That is recognition. Okay. So, for few of you guys, I have already discussed this reading technique before also, but I thought I should give 5-10 minutes once again on this, because how you read a book, the technique for reading the book is a basis upon which our recall technique is based. In fact, the last R in SQ3R is recall. So scan, then question, then first read, then second and third read is review. Okay, so you are reviewing the content. You are viewing it, but not for the first time, reviewing it 2 or 3 times. Boxes, keywords, review. And then final step, the last R is recall. It's not recognize, it is recall. When you are doing revision readings, you should not be engaging in recall. Everything that I have told you till now I am suggesting only one small modification. Okay. That modification is, when you open the book, read the heading, jump over the keywords, and after that try to talk to yourself. In this entire sequence, the last part, talking to yourself, okay, remove it from the bottom and take it to the top. So you open the book, you read the heading, and before jumping over the keywords, take 5 minutes and look out the window, look at the ceiling, look at the fan, anywhere but the book. Okay. Stare at someone sitting in your study if you want. But हे चांगला एक्सक्यूज मिळतो ना, असं बघत बसायचं, काय बघतो, नाही नाही विचार करतो. So take 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes and try to recall what all is contained underneath this heading. Okay. And after you finish, I have remembered whatever I can, then go to the content. Okay. Then you will realize that after you tried to think for yourself, and then when you couldn't think, you started jumping over the keywords, then it will be that arecha movement. Your eyes jump over a word, are he ahe visarlo. But this reaction, that te hota ki, this reaction is an indicator that you recognized it. You didn't recall it. If you could have been able to recall it, you would have remembered it on your own. But that reaction after reading the word is an example of recognition. If you were in an exam, you would not have remembered that portion where this reaction happened. Asa. You will only remember those parts which you were able to dig up from your own memory. Okay. Now, the detailed for this, how do we do this is, whenever you open the book, so when you are engaging in active recall, okay, you should always be sitting with a pencil and a rough sheet in front of you, and your book should be open in front of you. Okay. So you open the book to a page. Let's say Lakshmikant, the chapter on Indian preamble. And within that, there is a heading called amendability of the preamble. So you open the book, you read amendability of the preamble. You keep a pen and close the book, and then look somewhere else and give your mind a trigger word. Okay, what all do I remember under this heading? Now, 2 things will happen. The moment you tell your brain to give you all the data in your mental library related to amendability of the preamble, your brain will start throwing up random pieces of information. Some of them will be relevant, some of them will be irrelevant. At this stage, your job is not to judge. Okay. The most important point is, your brain will not give you the information in the sequence in which it is given in the book. The mistake that many students do is, okay, amendability of the preamble. Preamble has been amended by 42nd amendment. That is not the first point. There is some other point. So we throw the 42nd amendment point aside and we try to think sequentially. That will not happen. Okay. Sometimes your brain may tell you the last point first. At this point, just let your thoughts flow. Remember whatever you are remembering in whichever sequence you are remembering. Don't think whether this is first point or second point or last point. Don't try to tell yourself, is this relevant or not? Just pick up a pencil, keep a rough sheet in front of you, and as and how the thoughts go on occurring to you, just jot them down on the rough sheet. Now, these are very, very rough notes. Okay. These are one-time use. So don't beautify them. You write them once, and then after that revision session is over, you crumple it up and you throw it away. Very rough notes. Okay. Then after, as you are continuing this, another important point is there will be certain points which you will be able to recall 100%. And under that heading, whatever points are contained, I am remembering all of them. And at the other end, there will be certain points which you have no idea existed at all. So for example, when I say amendability of the preamble, what are all the important points you have to remember? First one is, is the preamble part of the constitution? You have to remember two cases. 1960 Berubari Union case, Supreme Court said that no, preamble is not part of the constitution. 13 years later, Kesavananda Bharati case, Supreme Court said, overruled its judgment. Preamble is part of the constitution, but subject to two conditions. Why is preamble part of the constitution? Because it was passed with the same method as the rest of the constitution. But two conditions. Preamble is neither a source of authority nor a restriction on authority. Okay. Then next point is, has the preamble been amended till date? The answer is yes, only once. 42nd amendment during the emergency. What was changed? Socialist, secular, and integrity. These words were added. Now, since I have taught polity so many times and revised this content so many times, I was able to recall all the points top to bottom 100% and in sequence. But you are not going to be able to do this at the beginning of your studies, which is okay. When I was at your level, even I could not do it. Okay. But important point is some points. And I would actually say if there are 10 points under a heading, the first time you are recalling it, you may be able to effectively remember only 2 or 3 of them. Maximum. Not beyond that. Don't get discouraged. If this happens to you, you are not abnormal. You are not stupid. You are human. Okay. If you later on, when you see the animated summary of that, that Make It Stick book, in that book, they have given this graph. It's called the forgetting graph. Once we first read the content, we quickly go on forgetting it. And their study has shown that when you read a content for the first time, you have forgotten 70% of what you read within the first 12 hours. And that is where this 2 or 3 comes from. You remember actually only 30% of what you have read. Many times students come in front of me, I'm reading the book, Dada, but not remembering much of it. I ask them, how much are you remembering? And they say that maybe 50, 60%. Actually, that is also an overestimation. The first time you read something, you are only going to remember 25 to 30% of the content, which is totally natural and normal. Okay. And then if you don't quickly revise the content for the second time, even that percentage is going to go down. So the first time, if there are 10 points under a heading, you will barely be able to effectively recall only 2 or 3 of them. Okay. These are very easy to identify because we remember it 100%. The other end of the spectrum will be certain topics which you didn't even know existed. Under the heading of amendability of the preamble, it may happen that you totally forgot about the 42nd amendment. असं काय होतं भांगड त्या पुस्तकामध्ये हेच आठवत नाहीये. Okay. That will be also very easy to identify because it will not be mentioned at all in your rough notes. Later on, when you're reading the book, you will realize that there is no mention of it. So 0% is also very easy to identify. What is challenging is that majority of the points will be somewhere in between these two extremes. Not 100%, but not 0%. And how will that be? Preamble's book is open. My rough sheet and pencil is in my hand. Heading is amendability of the preamble and something like this. Okay. Okay. What all is contained under this heading? Okay. The first is preamble part of the constitution. That's all I remember. Okay. This is partial remembering. Let's not, if we say maybe this is 10% remembering. Someone may be preamble part of the constitution. Okay, there are two cases under this. Which two cases? I don't remember. Partially. Okay. One step further is, okay, amendability of the preamble. Two cases. Keshavananda Bharati and Berubari Union. I messed up the sequence and this will also happen to you. Berubari Union is first. Keshavananda Bharati is second. But when you are trying to remember it, you may remember Keshavananda Bharati first, Berubari Union next. No problem. Okay. Point is, for majority of the points, when you are remembering them partially, don't discard them. Write them down over here. Very small bullet points. Okay. What I used to do is, suppose this happens, my mind is running, amendability of the preamble. Okay, first, preamble part, question mark. See, this is not making any sense to anyone. It doesn't have to. Okay, this is temporary. So, preamble part of the constitution. Under this heading, there are two cases. Which two cases? Forgetting. So, now what you should do is, write down two cases and put a question mark. This question mark indicates that your mind was telling you that there is something more over here, but you could not remember. Kai hota athvat nahi. Okay. And that's okay. It is an indicator. The first time you are reading a content, majority of the content will be lost. Part of the content will be partially remembered and a few points will stick very efficiently in your mind. There is no way to tell which parts will stick, which parts will fade, and which parts will stay partially. And that is exactly the point of this entire exercise. That you should be able to identify what has stuck and what has not stuck. Okay. Because if you are reading the whole chapter once again, you are giving everything equal weightage. If something has already stuck in your mind and you are reading it once again, you are giving it unnecessary importance. But if some other point is constantly slipping from your memory and you give it equal effort with something that has stuck, whatever has stuck and whatever is slipping out, it will keep slipping out unless you give it extra effort. But for that to happen, you have to actually remember what it is that is slipping constantly. Okay. And that is where this analogy comes into play. This image that I have put in front of you. Learning a new topic is like painting a wall. If you have ever seen a painter paint a wall, the wall is your brain, the color is the topic, and the paintbrush is the tool that you are using, that is the book. So the first time that the painter rolls on the wall, the color doesn't equally stick everywhere. Which means the first time that you read a book, it's not going to stick everywhere equally. In fact, for 70% of the color is just going to slide off. Okay. Now, this is where the analogy ends, because what a painter usually does is he repaints the whole wall again. Dusra kiya tisra hath marne ase je manto na आपण त्याला. But that is when we are reading the same content again and again, we are like that painter who is brushing the entire wall a second time. He is giving everything equal weightage. This is a very inefficient use of your time and mental energy. What you should be doing is, you should identify those patches of the wall where the paint has stuck and direct your efforts to those parts where the paint has not stuck. But to be able to do this, you have to be able to identify the difference between the two. And this exercise will help you in that. Okay. So first point, open the book, rough sheet. Read the heading, trigger your mind. Let your thoughts flow. Like opening the gates of a dam, the water, the thoughts will start bursting out. Those thoughts will not be in sequence. Many of those thoughts will not even be complete. Some points will be 100%, some points will be 0%, some points, majority of the points will be in between. Don't hold back. Don't try to go for sequencing. Don't try to go for relevancy. Don't try to go for completeness. Just write down very roughly whatever you are thinking of. So Shant is making a very good point. In this analogy, the white color is an example of removing everything. Anyways, let your thoughts flow. Sequence doesn't matter. Relevancy doesn't matter. Accuracy doesn't matter. Nothing. Just let your thoughts flow. Now, like a tap, you turn on the tap, and if there is limited water in the pipe, okay, whatever water is there initially because of the pressure, it will start bursting down. Okay. Then as the pressure of the water reduces, the flow will reduce. And finally, like the last 1 or 2 drops falling, then after that sort of a sound, no more water will start coming out. And that is how your mind works also. The first time that you let your thoughts run, you let your thoughts flow, lots of points will start occurring to you. Just write them down one below the other. But as time progresses, and by time progress, I mean a few minutes. Our brain works very fast that way. Okay. Don't spend 10-15 minutes simply shaking your pen in the air and thinking, let me remember more, let me remember more. Initial flow of thought, then the flow will slow down, and then finally after a few drops, you will stop remembering newer points. When this happens, and this will barely be few minutes, okay, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes max. I am not telling you to do a lot of additional effort. Okay, in my method of teaching, my emphasis is always on small, least amount of time. We want to achieve maximum in minimum amount of time. So this point, it takes barely a few minutes. Then when this point occurs, that you are no longer remembering newer points, that is when you go to read the content. That is when your eyes now start jumping over the keywords. And every time this happens, that I forgot this point. Your mind will give you a clarification. Okay, this was partial, this is complete. This is the sequence. Okay. At any point where, as your eyes are jumping over the book, 3 things will happen. First is, this point completely I remember. Mark it down in the margin. Come up with some sort of a ranking system. That ranking system can be anything. Percentage, out of 10, ABCD. I used to go for star rating. 3 star is completely remember. 1 star is completely forgot. 2 star is partially remembered. I didn't go for 5 star because then how do you differentiate between 2 star, 3 star, 4 star? There is a lot of subjectivity. So I kept it simple, 3 star. Reading, okay, this point completely forgot, 1 star. Next, completely remember, 3 star. Another point, partially remembered, 2 star. Go star marking that way. Okay. And then for subsequent readings, once you come back to that chapter the next time, don't read the chapter sequentially. Interleave your studies. This is another way of interleaving. We open the chapter of preamble, and when we are rereading the content, we read it from page-wise, left to right, page-wise, sequentially. Okay. Original reading sati, this is good. You have to do this. You have to read it sequentially. I say, you can't read it hodgepodge and then get a consolidated view. But to remember, you have to turn it in, you have to turn the content into a khichdi. Mix it up, everything. So then next time when you open the book, as your mind is jumping over the words, first take your eyes down the left and right margins. Okay. Then wherever you see 1 star or 2 star, read those points first. and then later on come back to the heading and repeat this active recall exercise. So I am combining rereading with recall. For the third, one time I am reading, open the book, jot down whatever I remember, new thoughts, stop, compare this with the book, mark down, full, partial, nothing. Next time, open the book, look at the stars, wherever I see one star, read those points again, revise them in your mind one time, but understand that this is recognition. Your mind is, your eyes are going down the left margin, one star disla, go in. Read that part. What is this? Okay, it's recognition. Okay. But after few rounds of recognition, you should have another round of recall. Then maybe 1 or 2 times. Then one day, once again, you come with a pen and pencil and paper, open the book, heading, try to remember it for yourself. Then compare and maybe revise the star ratings. Maybe upgrade a few points. Sometimes also downgrade also happens. That is funny with the human mind. First time you remembered it, next time you forgot. There's no explanation for that. Okay. This is active recall. Okay. And then final 2 points. These are not related to active recall, but I thought they should be considered over here. Kshipra is asking, can we identify that topic by practicing questions on that topic? Yes, you can. It has the same effect. But then always remember that the practice set that you are using, it should cover the entire chapter. Many times, if you go for maybe a 50-question test on polity, not all the points in that chapter will be included in the questions. So it may happen that coincidentally that test did not include this point. You didn't remember it, but because it was not in the test, you didn't identify it either. Okay. So testing also works, but this is a more surefire method. Okay. Yeah, Gayatri, please, in your question, I will share with my contact information with you later on. So you can reach out to me later. Okay. Then 2 final points in this is, for revision, use sleep to your benefit. This is an absolutely neurologically proven fact. The last thing that you do before shutting off for the day, 1 hour before sleeping, and the last thing that you do before sleeping, you finish your day, dinner ho gaya, brushing your teeth, you change into your night dress, and finally you sit on your bed, and then the last thing 1 hour before sleeping, open your book and run through the pages. Okay. It will surprise you immensely. Then after that 1 hour is over, close the book, keep it aside, and then go to sleep. This Dharmadhikari sir has given this in Nava Vijaypath. Okay. And then next morning when you wake up, after you're brushing, the first thing is just quickly refresh those yesterday night's points. It will surprise you how much they stick in your mind. And modern neuroscientific research is also proving this. Basically, what is the purpose of sleep in our biological cycle, in our body clock? 2 things. The first purpose is recharge and maintenance. Our body gets tired. We realize that. Okay, the joints start aching, the muscles are aching, and that is why we want rest. So when we are sleeping, our body is resting. That much is obvious. Okay. But what is equally important is that our mind is also resting. Just as toxic material is created in our body during the day, similarly, neurotoxins are created in our mind also, and those neurotoxins are cleaned during the night. And a second more important function of sleep is that the information that you have taken in throughout the day is being classified in the appropriate categories. Your mind has a library. If anyone is a fan of animated movies, there is this very nice movie called Inside Out. In that, they have shown this in an animated way. whatever information you are taking in, the mind is classifying that information in appropriate categories. What to keep, what to discard, etc., etc., etc. Okay. And this is where this part comes most important, is that the information that you have taken in immediately before sleeping is the information which is freshest in your mind. I'm not going to go into additional details. So just so you know that what is this concept I'm talking about. I'm talking about the difference between working memory and long-term memory. In neuroscience, human memory is of two types. Like computer memory is also of two types. There is RAM and ROM. RAM is the data contained in RAM is only stored, is only retrievable as long as the electricity is running. When the electricity is shut down, the RAM is cleaned. That there is a similar mechanism in our mind that is called as the working memory. And then there is something called as long-term memory, which is like the hard disk. The data stored in the long-term memory is safe and sound even when the power is switched off. Okay. Now here power means our attention. When you are inputting new information into your brain, it first goes to your working memory. And then your brain has to make a decision. Is this information important for long-term storage, or is it to be discarded? One very simple example is when you are riding around in Pune, your eyes will naturally go across many number plates. How many number plates can you actually remember? 0. Because your eyes take in that information, and for maybe 7 seconds, your mind may be able to tell that number. Okay. Actually, for number plates, our mind has gotten so used to discarding that information that it doesn't even last 7 seconds. But otherwise, the information that is in your working memory generally sticks around for 7 seconds. In that 7 seconds, the brain has to decide, is this important or can this be discarded? And unfortunately, we don't have control over that. We can't say that I want to remember this. So transfer it to long-term storage. That is not the way it works. Okay. Actually, this point is also related to why I told you should be writing down questions, because questions are formed in our working memory. If we don't store them for long-term storage, the brain will discard them. But that is a knowledge gap which was identified but which has not been filled. Okay. So the information that you are taking in right before you go to sleep, it is the freshest in your mind when it goes to sleep. And that is why it is most easily available for your mind to transfer to long-term storage. So whatever you read and refresh just before sleeping, greater portion of that will be transferred to your long-term memory. That is why the last 1 hour before sleeping and the first few minutes, half an hour after waking up should be dedicated to revision. Okay. And then last point, I won't spend too much time on this because I don't claim to be an expert in that, is start doing yoga and pranayama. Absolute modern scientific research is showing this, that the breathing exercises have a very positive effect on our mental energy. Those people who practice regular yoga, pranayama, it can be any version of pranayama. Some people like Art of Living Sudarshan Kriya. Some people go for yoga samadhi siddhi. Now, it can be anything. Okay. But practice pranayama. Sir will talk more about this on you in our Adhishtan Malika because he is the expert. But just so you know that there is something like this. Okay. So active recall. Make it stick book. First point, interleaving. Mix up your study. Second point, active recall. The difference between recognition and recall. And then the last point in make it stick, spaced repetition. What spaced repetition is trying to tell you is that, see, majority of us, when we think about revision, what we mean is we emphasize on how many times we have revised the content. 5 revision, 7 revision, 10 revision, 15 revision. Okay, okay, no problem. But actually, neuroscience and psychology tells us that more important than how many times you have revised something is when did you revise it. More important than quantity of revision is the timing of your revision. Okay, कसं रे? How does this work? So in psychology, there is something called as, in astrophysics, there is something called as the Goldilocks zone. How many of you have heard this? The Goldilocks zone. Yeah, I know you have. We have talked about. Anybody online? Type करायला फार वेळ जाईल. So Goldilocks zone is talking about this optimum distance from any star, in which if a planet is located at that distance from the star, then only then life can exist on that planet. Okay, because Earth is located in the Goldilocks zone from the sun. Because as a planet starts to move further and further away from the sun, the heat and light intensity starts to reduce. If you are too close to the sun, the heat intensity is very high, and the water on that planet will evaporate. Life cannot exist in gaseous format, where for the most important thing for life to exist is liquid water. In gaseous format, life cannot exist. But if you move too far away from the sun or any star, the temperature drops down too much and the water freezes. And life cannot exist in icy conditions either. So not too hot, but not too cold. Optimum distance. And this is related to spaced repetition in such a way that when we first read something, this part is very obvious. Human memory declines with time. Human memory declines with time. Once you read something, as time progresses, you will start forgetting it. So if you don't revisit that content time to time, you will ultimately forget everything. But the timing of this revisiting is very important. Okay. I have already told you that the average human forgetting curve is within the first 12 hours, you have forgotten 70% of what you have read. This doesn't make you stupid. This makes you human. Okay. In fact, in a way that this graph is slightly wrong. See, the first time when the graph is basically the vertical axis is giving you retention, how much you retaining as a percentage. And the horizontal graph is telling you how many days have passed. So 0 day is when you first read that content and your retention goes to 100%. 1 day later, this graph is saying that it has come down to 80%. But actually studies are telling us that it does not come down to 80%. It comes down to 30%. When you read something for the first time, within 12 hours, you have forgotten pretty much 70% of what you read. What this means is, once you first read some content, there is a very optimum Goldilocks zone after your first reading. If you revise that content within that optimum zone, if you give it a push from the bottom, within that zone, then it will jump up, and then the next forgetting curve, see the subsequent horizontal lines, the slope is declining. Okay. So if you are able to catch that optimum moment, your retention will go up and the rate of forgetting will decrease. So every subsequent horizontal line is getting flatter and flatter. So more and more time is going between every subsequent revision. So your revisions, how many times you revise is important, but the spacing of your revisions is also equally important. When you are totally new to the content, your revisions have to be packed close together. But as you start remembering more and more of it, the distance between your revision sessions should go on increasing. Okay? That is the important point. This is called spaced repetition. This is the theory. Okay. And to put it into practice, the first thing that I will, before giving action points, what I will tell you is Chanakya Mandal Pariwar offers a psychometric test called UPSC Gestalt. This test has been developed by our trustee, Dr. Bhushan Kelkar. Okay. What is this test? And you'll understand why I'm linking it with this. So first of all, about Dr. Bhushan Kelkar, he is a IIT Powai graduate long back. He has completed his PhD in artificial intelligence from Glasgow, Scotland. And then after that, for about 15 to 20 years, he was a very senior executive in IBM. IBM company, IBM. And he was in America. And then he chose to come back to India and contribute in the field of educational psychology. So his work is all about marrying technology, artificial intelligence, and educational psychology. His test is backed up by artificial intelligence, the algorithms that he has written. It is a 35-minute online test, which for you guys, the CMP students who have enrolled for the course, it is included as part of your course itself. Bhushan sir conducts a separate session where he explains to you the test. Then after you have given the test, he takes another session where he explains how do you read the report. And then if you want, you can have about a 1 hour individual counseling session with him also. Okay. There are many parameters in that test, but one very important parameter that it tells you is, it's called your R1, R2, revision 1, revision 2. So that test conducts your long-term and short-term memory test. I won't tell you how that test happens because it will spoil the whole point of it. But for pictures, words, and numbers, what percentage do you remember for a short period, and what percentage do you remember for a longer period? And based on that, you are given an R1 and R2. R1 and R2 is basically the distance between 0 to 1, 1 to 2. Okay. So once you read something for the first time, should you be revising it within 8 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours? There are some people who can stretch the distance between R1 and R2 to as far as 24 hours. Okay. But for those who don't want to give the test, or you just want a rule of thumb, the general rule of thumb is 12 hours. Once you read this for the first time, 70% of the content is forgotten within the next 12 hours. And then the remaining 30%, the rate of decline reduces. But if too much time passes in between, then you will pretty much forget everything. And this brings me back to the important point which I have discussed with you guys, but which needs to be repeated with you people. Okay. When you are reading a book, why did I say go one chapter at a time? I get this question very often that, Dada, you are telling us to read one chapter 3 times before moving on. But this will slow down our studies. Students sometimes get stressed that at such a slow pace of progress, will my studies be completed in time? So on that point, learn to trust me. Okay. If you are basically an average intelligent student, not too bright, not too stupid, yes, you will finish within time. Don't worry. Okay. But like I had said previously also, if you go with the attitude, pudcha path, magcha sapat, this is the attitude many students take. You open a book and you just go on reading it, never bothering to revise. Okay. You will realize that, see, what happens is, for many students, once they see the stack of books that they have to read, they get stressed. How am I going to finish such a big, huge stack of books in time? And it is out of this desperation that students tell themselves that let me first read the entire syllabus at least once. Ek reading ho jane do. Then I will come back for revision reading. So you pick up the first book, read it. Second book, read it. Third book, read it. And then after you complete this entire cycle once, you come back to the first book. Okay? And you are feeling good about yourself. Okay, entire syllabus happened. Once it has gone from under our eyes, and now I can start revision. But then the shock that you feel when you open the book for the second time, that is when you realize, and many months have passed in between. The stack of our compulsory reading books is so big that it will take you many months to even finish one reading of the entire syllabus. And then after that cycle, once you come back to for the second reading, you open the first book for the second time, it hits you in the face that whatever you have done for the past few months, completely down the drain. You will hardly remember 1 or 2 points. And that feeling of frustration and discouragement, stress is very tough to deal with. Many students give up in this phase. But if you actually understand why has this happened, you are not stupid. Overall, in your studies, I keep on repeating this point that whatever you are doing, if it is not giving you results, the problem is not you. The problem is your system. This is a sentence I have borrowed from Atomic Habits. He says, if you are having trouble breaking your bad habits or building new good habits, the problem is not you, the problem is your system. Same applies for studies. Doing good studies is about cultivating good study habits. And if your studies are not giving you the results you want, the problem is not that you are stupid, which many students, they decide for themselves that I am stupid. The problem is not you, the problem is your system. And this is the systematic problem that we are talking about. Once you read something for the first time, as time progresses, it is invariable that you are going to forget it. And if you let too much time progress between your first reading and your revision, then your revision will not stay It will not be revision. It will be vision. Too much time has passed in between. So when you revisit the content for the second time, the first reading is down the drain and the second reading is as if it's a first reading. That is why the most important point in our studies is, in your study, build in significant slots for revision. Okay. The principle behind this is, when you are new to the content, the time you are dedicating for revision will be small, but it will be closely packed together. The first revisions are closely packed together. And then as the topic starts to slowly, as the topic starts to become clearer, the distance between the time gap between your revisions will go on increasing. Okay. So today, if I make 2 bar charts, okay, study time, revision time. You guys are new, so your study time will be large, but always remember that small amount of time has to be given for revision. As the months progress, slowly the study time will go on reducing, the revision time will go on reducing. And by the end of next year, midpoint next year, you should be like this. This small portion of new study is basically keeping your current events up to date. And majority of your time should be dedicated to revision. Okay. Now, what are the action items in this? Hopefully this theory part is clear. But you may say, ki, "Theek hai, Dada, give me action points. What am I supposed to do?" Okay. I will give you 3 golden rules of revision. Okay. Three golden rules of revision. These rules are, the first one is the rule of 1 day. 1 hour. 1 hour. Second rule, 1 day. Okay. And third rule, 1 month. All of this simplifies revision very much. 1 hour, 1 day, 1 month. What do I mean by this? 1 hour every day should be dedicated to revision. And this point I have already covered. Ideally, it should be the last hour before sleeping. And I have already shared with you the neurological reasons for the same. The last 1 hour before sleeping, just scan through your book and constantly keep on talking with yourself. Hey, that this is that point, okay? Asa sagad, okay? 1 hour before sleeping. काय हा चिंतन एक्झॅक्टली चिंतन सर्वात बरोबर शब्द आहे. पुस्तक उघडायचं, नजर फिरवायची आणि स्वतःशी जे आपण मनात बोलत असतो ते चिंतन करून हा मुद्दा असा असतो, हे असतं. आता त्या चिंतनामधनं कदाचित प्रश्न पण पडेल आपल्याला, मग तो लिहून ठेवायचा. ओके, चिंतन बरोबर. 1 hour every day, last 1 hour before sleeping. Okay. Next point is 1 day. This is 1 day per week. Okay. At different times, I conduct sessions on study planning also, time management for study. In that, one very important point I tell you is that out of all of your plans, monthly plan, 3-month plan, 6-month plan, in fact, the most important plan is your weekly plan. And when you are planning for the next week, majority of you actually, you don't even plan for on a weekly basis. Our plans are grand plans, 28-day plan, 90-day plan. And then out of those 90 days, when 85 days are over, we realize that the entire plan has gone down the trash. So the most important aspect of our plans are weekly plans. And when you are planning for the next 7 days, I always tell you, remember 2 important points. The first one is out of 7 days, make a plan for only 6 days. You have to have that 1 day buffer because something or the other is going to go wrong within that 6 days. एक दिवशी बोर झालं, एक दिवशी काय मैत्रिणीने बोलवलं, होणारच आहे. So that your entire plan does not go off track, you need that 1 day buffer zone. Okay. And for what I'm talking about right now is this second rule, 1 day. So out of 7 days, 1 day is buffer, 5 days are for new studying, and 1 day should be totally dedicated to revision. What I recommend is your plans should be from Sunday to Sunday. Sunday should be buffer day. Okay. Because usually our motivation to study is least on Sundays. The दिवसाचा असतो गुणधर्म आहे. Quality of the day की Sunday आज नाही काय. So ठीक आहे. Sunday is buffer zone. If you were able to study very well for the past 6 days, you can legitimately give yourself a break of 1 day and you will truly be able to enjoy it. If you know that there is a whole stack of backlog pending, then when you go to enjoy your Sunday, you will not even be able to healthily enjoy your Sunday because your mind will constantly be nagging you. Okay? So for 6 days, make a plan, follow the plan, and then reward yourself with 1 day off. Okay. And if your plan goes out of bounds, then you still have that 1 day to fill up the backlog. And what I recommend is every Saturday, leave the entire day for revision. Go over whatever you have done over the past few days. These 3 things, interleaving, active recall, for whatever you have covered over the past 5 days. Okay. This is 1 hour, 1 day. And final point is 1 month. This will come later on, but remember, as you start becoming stronger and stronger with certain topic, the gap between revision sessions can go on increasing. But in any case, always be careful that the gap between any 2 revision sessions must never exceed 30 days. This is not actually a very challenging thing, okay? as your efficiency in revision goes on increasing, I am telling you, you can finish an entire revision of Lakshmikant in half a day. Entire Lakshmikant. Not a very difficult thing. Okay. If you follow the technique I am telling you, original reading, read the chapter 3 times, compress it, first reading, second reading boxes, third reading words, then later on, one session of active recall combined with few sessions of rereading, etc., etc., you will start to get that internal feeling of confidence that my grip over this topic is slowly increasing. You will start to see results. Every next time you go for active recall, you will remember more and more of what you had read. And that confidence, it keeps up our motivation. This is a very important theory in the psychology of motivation. What we think, we need motivation to take action. Okay? काहीतरी कुठलं तरी फुल पंप अप गाणं ऐकलं किंवा काय लक्ष मूवी वगैरे पाहिला, तो लिगर पाहिला कदाचित, भंकस असणारे माहिती आहे मला, मला तशी बॉडी पाहिजे म्हणून जिमला जायला लागलो. मोटिवेशन डज नॉट लीड टू ऍक्शन. Action gives results, and those results create motivation. You find it in yourself to go to the gym, and 10-12 days later you slightly feel lighter, more energetic, and that energy leads to more and more motivation. Okay. It's the same thing in our studies also. You cannot constantly have an external dose of motivation. कधी टॉपर टॉक पाहिजे, कधी कुठली तरी इन्स्पिरेशनल व्हिडिओ. युट्यूबचं मार्केट तर तुंबलेलं आहे मोटिवेशनल व्हिडिओज. कारण स्टुडंट मेनी अ टाइम खच्ची होत असतात ते अभ्यासाला लागले की. सो काहीतरी खालनं सारखा डोस देणं गरजेचं असतं. नो वन एव्हर बॉदर्स टू एक्सप्लेन अस वाय कॉन्स्टंटली स्टुडंट्स आर गेटिंग डिजेक्टेड. द आन्सर इज your efforts are not giving you results. And why are they not giving you results? Because your system is flawed. Change your system, you will start to see results. Those results will give you further motivation. It is a virtuous cycle, not a vicious cycle. Virtuous cycle. Okay. Efforts lead to motivation. Motivation leads to further efforts. So finally, last point again is, if your overall, today we covered just a small component of studying, revision. There are many other components: reading books, making notes, okay, analyzing PYQs, writing practice. Each of these topics can have a separate 2-hour session. But basic point at the start is, if your studies are not giving you the results you want, the problem is not you. The problem is your system. Understand the psychology behind study and then modify your system accordingly. Okay. Now for the new students in front over here and those online, no doubt you will have lots of questions. So after every session, I always make it a point to stick around for around 5-10 minutes. Today I have another commitment, so I have to leave quickly. But I will share with all of you my phone number, and any questions you have, feel free to message me. Okay, 74994 6 8 8 ठीक आहे 68876. ओके. चॅट बॉक्स मध्ये पण टाकून ठेवतो. ठीक आहे. चलो प्रार्थना करू, थांबूयात आपण.
नव्या वैभवाचीच स्वप्ने सजावी, मनी हास्य लेऊन मुक्ती जगावी, हवी फक्त उन्मुक्त निर्माण शक्ती, नवी ध्येय आसक्त प्रल्हाद भक्ती, हवी फक्त उन्मुक्त निर्माण शक्ती, नवी ध्येय आसक्त प्रल्हाद भक्ती, अहंता गळावी अभंगास म्हणता, तपस्येत तल्लीन आतून होता, प्रतिभे समस्तीत आकार यावे, उरी उत्तमाचेच ओंकार गावे, हवी फक्त उन्मुक्त निर्माण शक्ती, नवी ध्येय आसक्त प्रल्हाद भक्ती, जरी एक अश्रू पुसायास आला, तरी जन्म काहीच कामास आला, जरी अश्रु विस्फोट होऊन सजला, तरी मुक्त ज्वालामुखी जन्म झाला, हवी फक्त उन्मुक्त निर्माण शक्ती, नवी ध्येय आसक्त प्रल्हाद भक्ती, नवी ध्येय आसक्त प्रल्हाद भक्ती, नवी ध्येय आसक्त प्रल्हाद भक्ती.
चलो गुड नाइट.